was
All right. According to the Rockwell timepiece, once again, it's time to get coached up with another edition of the Coach Scott Field Show. So come on in, stay a while, get coached up as we have another outstanding guest. Rockwell is now a proud partner of the Coach Scott Field Show, and I'm proud to be a brand ambassador for Rockwell. Go to rockwelltime.com, use the code COACH20 and receive 20% off any order, or use the code Hero Coach and buy any item, which is sunglasses or watches, at the regular price, and you can receive a free Hero watch, which will support any of our armed services, police officers, or fire departments. So that's an outstanding item. Like and follow the Coach Scott Field Show on Facebook. Smash that subscribe button on our YouTube channel. If you're listening to us in podcast form, uh, Florida Junior College Hall of Fame coach and I, Coach Bob Starkman, say, turn that knob up. We're about to put that flavor in your ear. Just know you can watch this on dbtv.tv Monday through Friday at 1 o'clock Eastern Time, which is on Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV. Also on CSTVs Wednesdays at 7 p.m. We're also on the Rewind Sports 60. And now, this week, we are now on Let's Talk Sports Network out of the UK. So without further ado, let's welcome on our guest, Coach Bob Starkman. Coach, welcome to the Coach Scott Field Show, my friend.
Thank you, and thanks for having me on.
Oh, thrilled to have you. About a couple months ago, you sent me a copy of this book that you authored, and I'm going to tell you what, compelling, fascinating life that you have led, and we're going to talk about that a little bit. Inside Both Courts. Talk a little bit about your background with what you did, and then we'll kind of get into the coaching aspect of it, Coach.
Well, coming out of college, while I was in college, I was actually playing basketball. I had no idea what I really wanted to do. And I believe it was the summer of '77. We were out in the Hamptons, which is like a summer place similar to the Jersey Shore, I guess, to New York. People all go out there, Manhattan and Jersey go to the Jersey Shore. And I got up in the morning after a rough night out with my friends. And I was reading, picked up the Daily News, and it was called the parade section, the color section on the Sunday paper. And I happened to see this story about New York's toughest cop. And it was about a cop named Ralph Friedman. And I just read the story, and it really intrigued me. And it kind of gave me the incentive, like I said, it motivated me to start taking police tests with some of my other friends. And years later, it started.
So how many years did you spend in law enforcement? And take us kind of through the progression of what that career and what that journey was like for you.
Well, I always joke, I started as a bouncer at a club. I said that was my prerequisite,
The indoctrination.
Right. And what happened was, back in the '70s, I was taking every, civil service test. I really wanted to become a New York City cop. And, during the '70s, the budget crisis, everything was kind of, they were actually laying cops off. And first job I got called for was a state correction officer. And I took it. Actually, a very good friend of mine, Carl Torsano, had been hired before that, and he was working already. And we were very unique in the fact that we were called 2-day wonders. They were so short personnel that we went to the academy for 2 days in Albany, came back on a Friday night, and Monday morning I was told to report to Greenhaven State Prison, which at the time was a pretty rough place. It was a maximum A facilities, they called it, and it was very interesting. So that's where it started.
Interesting. What was that environment like for you? I mean, it's something that you aspired to do. You were motivated to get in law enforcement, but yet when you got into that environment, what was that like initiation like to get in there and be, you know, surrounded by that type or those types of individuals?
I felt like Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz. But, what happened was, again, I took the first, job that, called me. And the first day we went up there, and I mentioned that in my book, it was like a James Cagney movie. We get, my size. And back then, I mean, I'm a pretty big guy. Back then, 6'5" was about 275. And you go, usually it's kind of like being in elementary school where they, line you up, shortest to tallest. And I'll never forget going in there. And just to take it back one step, my junior year in college, we knew a parole officer who was a former correctional officer. He brought a couple of us guys up from the college to play against the inmates. Well, that was fun because at the end of the day, we went home. But when you pull up to this facility, you see a 50-foot wall, 1 mile around with 12 guard towers. And I always joke, but when you go through it, for the younger people out there, if you remember the show Get Smart, and when Maxwell Smart would go into his office and you hear the music and then the door would shut, I always think of that clanking because the guy that brought us in said, "You'll never forget this sound." And I could still hear it, like when I think about it. So, we're marching through the yard. It was kind of like a hazy day. It was exactly, I think it was July, probably around July 30th. I think we went to the academy the 25th. And walking through there, seeing like mattresses burning, smoke in the cells. It was like it was another world, literally. It's like you're walking through the city. And I'll never forget this girl that was next to me. And these inmates were yelling out some vulgar things. And she was actually a good-looking young lady. And I always joke, and I said, a woman in jail that's a 0 in the street is a 15 in jail, not even a 10. So we're marching in, and I'm like, I started saying to myself, what am I doing here? And they're yelling all these vulgar things. And she turns around, says to me, excuse me, she says, "Are they saying this to you?" I said, "No, they're talking to you." So then we're walking through, and again, I'm like, do I really want this? Like, it was crazy. And then growing up in New York, you see a lot of things, but I never saw anything like this before. And we're going through, getting a tour of the facility. And we went, I remember we went into G block, which I later found out what they call the bugs. Those are for the ones that are on medication and whatever. And there is no good inmates in that prison, I can tell you that, let alone any prison. But, we're going up the stairs to the second tier of the building, the block. And there's my friend Carl sitting there, rolling up, they call packing up. He had an inmate. He was rolling up his mattress like Fonzie. He had a pack of cigarettes rolled up. He's sweating like a pig. And I believe he was smoking a cigarette. You were able to do it back then. And my nickname was Stitch. And he turns around and goes, "Stitch, what's up?" From that moment on, I said, this can be a lot of fun. It indoctrinated me to the fun side.
There you go.
Yeah. And then, we just started working. And, then we got a house up there, a couple of us. My friend Carl, another guy, Danny Dolank, that we grew up with, he got hired when I did. And we rented a house. And I was actually there the shortest period of time. And, again, I used that as a stepping stone. And in 9 months, I think it was about 9 months I was there, I got called to be a city correction officer. And I'm like, things are so funny how they work out. So I resigned and, waiting to start on a Monday. I remember that weekend I was driving with my wife to a friend Helen's house. At the time it was called the Interborough Parkway, whatever. And I see the Queen's House of Detention. I said to my wife, I said, it's going to take me 15 years to get to that place, to work. Monday, I report to the academy, and I tell everybody the story. It's funny, after working in Greenhaven, in any jail, in fact, very few things could really scare you. You're there with the worst of the worst. And I remember it was my second day in the academy, and you're marching through. This was on Rikers Island. So remember, these are detainees. They're not convicted yet, so they're pretty wild. And they're yelling and screaming and yelling and screaming. I'm laughing because I was with the worst of the worst 2 days ago before that. And I remember this inmate says to me, he goes, "New Jack." I go, "How do you know?" He says, "Look at your shoes," because I had older shoes that were scuffed up. They weren't the shiny ones, brand new. My belt was all scuffed up, and I had a keychain that I bought at the bar Tower 13 in Greenhaven And I'm sure they've been through the system. They recognize that. And that meant
Wow.
on, I realized they know everything about you, which really helped me later on in my other careers. But
That
so I was there for like 5 days. I get called in. They call out like 4 or 5 names. I figure I'm in trouble. I know I didn't do anything wrong, but why are they calling me in so soon? Basically, again, some of the other facilities were so short. So I went to the Queen's house. I couldn't believe it. 5 days. They pulled me out of the academy because I was already state certified, because I had gone back to the academy while I was at Greenhaven. And I got assigned to the Queen's house. Somebody got assigned to the Brooklyn house and the Bronx house, which is a lot easier because you don't have to travel over the bridge to Rikers, and there's, thousands of offices there. And then my career started in the Queen's house. And I think it's really funny, I think around the, I don't know, second or third day I was working, the shifts were playing basketball against each other. And I met a guy, he actually broke me in when I was there, Ralph Natali. And he said, "Do you play ball?" I said, "Well, I used to play. I played in college a few years ago. I played every so often." He goes, "Yeah, we're playing whenever it was, the night, whenever it was." And I like to say I was really good. I was okay, but these guys weren't too good. They made me look like an All-American. So once again, basketball kind of crossed paths with law enforcement. So I'm working there, and I was working a shift, and something happened. And this was probably about a month and a half, right before I was getting married in May. So I started in the Queen's house in February. So right before I was getting married, big fight broke out, and I was able to separate. This was on a tier that had all the cop killers and the worst of the worst. And I remember getting called into the deputy warden of security. I remember he's an old Irish guy, Deputy Cantwell, and here I'm a big Jewish guy, and he's calling me my lad, and I'm like, I'm not used to that. And he said to me, if you had a choice to work a shift, what would you work? Now I'm figuring they're testing me because I'm brand new. I'm not even off probation. I said, listen, because we were working around the clock, 7 to 3, 3 to 11, 11 to 7, the wheel, they called it. And I said, listen, I'll work whatever I'm assigned to work. It's okay. You have steady days. I said, wow, this is great. That was the good news. The bad news was I had the unit that had all the cop killers and all the bad images. And it worked out. It was a very good experience for me because you learn a lot about, the criminal mind.
Yeah. Looking back now at it, Coach, just because knowing some people that have worked in the prison system, how much control do you really have in that environment, or do the prisoners kind of police themselves and you just kind of keep order within the environment? I'm just curious to hear your thoughts on
Well,
that.
this was in the 80s when, cops, corrections, they were able to do their job. You didn't have
Okay,
those,
okay. Say no more.
you never heard of defund the police, and the other thing that I always learned, and again, I always equate this to athletics, sports. I always felt that my best weapon, not because I was a big guy, my best weapon was my mind. How do you speak? How do you communicate?
Verbal
And,
judo, baby.
right. I've seen a lot of, guys, cops, correction officers, agents I work with, they're 5'3", all of a sudden they're wearing a uniform, they got a gun on. Now they all think they're Incredible Hulk.
Yeah.
But, again, I think you kind of gain your respect by the way you treat people, because at the end of the day, I'm in there with them just like the other officers are.
That's
And I
right.
worked with a lot of really good officers in the Queen's house. I worked with a lot in Greenhaven as well. But, there was an incident once which reflects on, on this mindset, what I was telling you about, how to speak. There was a fight broke out on the tier, and a guy came after me, tried to stab me. I'll use the politically correct word, subdue him. And I had to defend myself with a mop ringer. And next thing I know, again, I'm getting called in, it's kind of like a use of force thing. And right away, they want to investigate. And, I did nothing wrong. I used enough force necessary to effect an arrest. And that's what I did. And, it's going back and forth. And 2 days later, I get called in. Everything was dropped. I'm like, what happened? Well, there was an inmate there that was brought down on a hearing, whatever. So being that, because also with the cop kills, I also had protective custody, which had cops that were locked up that were dirty, had the snitches and the whatever you want to call them, transgenders. I don't know what the word was. Well, I know what the word was back then.
Yeah.
But anyhow, there was a guy in there, and it turned out that he was a relative or a worker, something of with the guy Nicky Barnes, who was the big drug kingpin. But he was down
Wow.
on a hearing, so they had to keep him up there. He saw the whole thing, and he actually wrote a letter on my behalf, which is unheard of because I'm the guy that, quote, the law enforcement put him there. And I saw him the next day. And I went up to him and I asked him, why did you do that? He said, because I knew you in Greenhaven. And he goes, you always was fair. Because in Greenhaven, after like 2 months, I had my own cell block already. That's how short it was. And I'm like, it's pretty interesting. It was like a nice feeling. But yet the bad feeling was my own agency, was ready to send me to the wolves, whether it would be suspension, whatever it was. But he wrote a letter on my behalf. And that
Wow.
washed everything. So that
Wow.
that taught me a lot, that there are some people that are legit as far as right and wrong.
There you go. I love that. Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching the Coach Scott Field Show. We got Hall of Fame coach Bob Starkman on with us, author of the book Inside Both Courts. This is the one-on-one segment of the Coach Scott Field Show, brought to you by Sleep Number. Sleep Number is the official sleep partner of the NFL and their official sleep partner of the Coach Scott Field Show. Give my guy Todd a call, 801-845-9058. He can work with anybody across the United States. If you want a weightless, temperature-controlled sleep, get a hold of my guy Todd. Coach, I'm just fascinated by your life, and I'm fascinated by the book and how it kept me turning the pages because I was always curious which way the story was going to lead. Where can the viewers of the Coach Scott Field Show, where can they find this book?
It's on Amazon.com. Just punch in Inside Both Courts with my name.
Yep.
Or they could actually reach out to me as well. I have some books too. And they can reach me at my email, which is browardcchoops@aol.com.
I like it. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're wanting a fascinating read that will keep you on the edge of your seat with some of these stories, that I'm only going to let Coach Bob kind of give you appetizers because I want you to go out and get the book, but just really appreciate Coach Starkman sending me the book, allow me the opportunity to read it so I could have insight on it to ask the questions. Coach, talk about some of the other steps that you made in law enforcement that was kind of set you on a career that put you on this path to do some fascinating things working with FBI, CIA, customs. Just unbelievable.
Well, again, I was still seeking. My goal was to become a New York City cop. And then what happened was I was doing working what they call the Sally Port, because I wasn't working in the regular population because I had the worst inmates. So if you had to do overtime, you would do maybe a hospital run, a security thing like that. And these two guys come in with a prisoner that happened to be a civil prisoner, which was housed in my unit, with the protective custody. And they flash these badges. And, in New York, anybody could get a badge. You get a gun too, the way things are going. But, what's it called? They show me this badge. It looked like a detective shield. They go, sheriff's office. I'm like, sheriff's office? I go, wait, Nassau County, Suffolk County, meaning Long Island upstate. They go, no, New York. I go, where? They go, New York City. I go, there's a sheriff office? They go, yeah, we're bringing back the civil prisoner. I said, how do you get that job? They go, there's one opening. It's the best kept secret. Why don't you put in for it? So that was before computers, whatever. I had to, have somebody, because it wasn't me. I can't type. But either my wife or my upstairs neighbor, I remember, she used to type for me when I put in for things. And they put in for it and I got the job. Right now, I think at the time there was only maybe 20 deputy sheriffs. It wasn't for me, but it was on parity with the same pay, Monday through Friday, no overtime, no jail. I figured it's a way out. And again, I never knew, I knew I wasn't going to stay there. I knew something was going to break. So I did that for about a year and a half. Basically, now it's huge, their department. They have marked vehicles, they have uniform guys. I don't know how many, but I wanted to work in the criminal aspect of law enforcement. To me, that's civil, whatever. So one day I got back from vacation. The story's in the book, but I got a phone call for customs. I went in, got the interview. The story is really funny. That's why I'll leave it for the readers. If they want to get the book, they'll enjoy it. It's a funny story. And I got hired by customs. And I started, it was October 3rd, 1983. We didn't go to the academy till that following January, but being we had prior law enforcement, they allowed us to qualify at the range, and we were able to work with other agents and patrol officers. I got hired what they call as a customs patrol officer. A lot of people got our job confused. We have customs inspectors, and then you have like the criminal investigators. The CPO, which was customs patrol officer, that position's no longer there. So they just have agents. So I got hired, like I said, as a CPO. So I worked in New York for a while, went to the academy in January, got out that April. 3 days before I graduated, I'm on the phone with my wife, Jill, and she tells me I just got a letter from NYPD, from the Office of Personnel, whatever they call it. I'm like, you know what? I just spent 3.5 months in Brunswick, Georgia. I'm a New York guy. I'm not going to no more academies, and I'm not big on school to begin with. So I didn't even answer it. Come back, I worked. I got assigned to it was, I believe, the Senator Al D'Amato task force out in Long Island. Worked there with the agents, had a good time. It still wasn't what I was looking for. It wasn't what I was looking for. I had a very good friend, Bob Benevente. He was working in Miami. He said, if we ever want to transfer, reach out to him. So what I did was myself and Nick Jacobellis, we went down to Florida on our own just to see what it was like. Like an
out of pocket, just go.
Like an unofficial visit, for the college.
Yeah.
We went down there, and I remember the chief of patrol at the time was a guy named Al Westerman, and he said, "Listen, guys," he says, "I could bring you down here, but on the Marine program." I said, "Listen, the only boat I've ever been on, I get sick, is the Circle Line, that big boat that goes around Manhattan." I said, "I can't work boats. I won't. I'll be taking Dramamine and overdosing, So he actually brought me in. He said, "Okay, when can you come down?" My wife was pregnant at the time. I don't even think I told her I was going to transfer. I said, "Well, when do you need us?" And this was probably, I think we were there May sometime. So I need you here by August or June. So August 25th, well, I finally told my wife, August 25th, I transferred to Miami. I went down with the intentions of 2 years, learn the job. Everything was Miami Vice. It was the cocaine cowboy days. I'm going to learn the job, come back to New York. I'm a New Yorker. I'm coming back to New York. Well, lo and behold, I got promoted 3 times, never came back, and had the time of my life working then.
Wow. Again, ladies and gentlemen, Coach Bob Starkman, the author of this unbelievable book, Inside Both Courts, meaning the courtroom and also the basketball court. Sharing stories here with our viewers and listeners today. Take me on a journey. You're skilled, you're trained. You've got the verbal judo. You know how to handle, traumatic situations. Was there ever a time where you were thrust into a situation and you're like, whoa, this could be life threatening? And what did that feel like? Was it just like an adrenaline rush for you? Could you just feel the heart pounding? And take us what that would be like, because there's only a small percentage of people who can share an experience like you had.
Well, it goes back to when I was a correctional officer in the Queen's House. At the time, they had 2 Black Liberation Army guys that had just killed a cop, Scarangella, and wounded another one, Rico Rainey. And I had a confrontation with him. And it was one of those things like, you can't back down, because now it's like you and him. And he was the scariest thing. James Dixon York had green eyes, stone cold killer. I think he shot Rainey 9 times with a 9mm, just kept on firing at him. And the guy survived. And, that was just kind of like my indoctrination to that, and there was times, just in jail, you're there. Remember, what I forgot to say earlier was, I remember the guy that walked us in, he was showing us around, Kenny Danino, his name was. I'll never forget him. And I said to him, I said, what are you carrying here? You have a nightstick, big deal. He goes, rosary beads. I go, that ain't going to work for me with the last name Starkman, And I always think about that,
Wow.
So there were situations in Miami, search warrants, car stops. It was during the crazy times, what they call the cocaine cowboy days. I could go. There was so many stories, but I think that I was so fortunate. I had a boss, Wayne Roberts. He was a Vietnam vet, sergeant in the Marines. He just taught us so much, and he was a leader. And everything I learned from him, I also took it onto the basketball court, just treating people, skills, how to make a team work, you know what I mean? Where maybe one guy writes good reports, one guy is good, knocking down doors. I wonder who that was. And, the other one might have been, guy interviewing, just different things. And I learned so much from him that it's almost like you almost feel invincible. You know what I mean? Like, but you got to be sharp. We were always on our toes, And later in my career, around 1988, I got to meet Joe Pistone, who co-authored my book. He's the famous Donnie Brasco. And he was my instructor at Undercover School.
Wow.
And he just gave me an education that is second to none. Like, you can't buy that, So I think a combination with good bosses, great guys to work with, it just, again, I always, in my book, I equate basketball with law enforcement and vice versa.
Yeah.
And I think that's what kind of got me through, and I think like you say, you get an adrenaline rush. And I really believe, because, this week has been horrible. 2 cops getting killed in Connecticut, 1 shot here, killed here. It's just been terrible. Like, to be a cop right now, it's my prayers are with these guys. My son-in-law just got promoted. He's a lieutenant now. And it's just like, and he's a military vet, a combat vet. But, like, you don't know the mindset of these people. It's another world right now.
Yeah.
And it's just like, it's scary, but you try not to think about it. You want to get through it, and
yeah.
And again, I'll tell you the end why I retired, and it was because of an incident, and we could get to that later. So, I could go on and on with stories, whether it's kicking a door down and finding 600 kilos, stopping a car with, $1 million, $2 million, just so much, and it's just, I think a lot of it is lady luck too, like the man above watches out for you.
There you go. There you go. Well, you mentioned, your Donnie Brasco. What were some of the big lessons that he taught you that carried with you throughout your life and into basketball? What were some of the things that, that really stick out at you, like, wow, that was meaningful and purposeful?
Well, first of all, we hit it off. And again, I'll save the good story for the book, for the readers.
Yeah.
They'd like to do it. We hit it off at Undercover School. We met, I'll tell the story how we met. He was the instructor at Undercover School. He had left the FBI at the time. And, living in Florida, I have the worst sinuses. I get sinus infections, my allergies. So my desk looked like Walgreens. I had like nose spray, antibiotics, water, orange juice, So my old partner introduced me to him. And he says, hey, this is Joe Pistone. So I shake his hand. I go, wow, you look a lot bigger in the book. He goes, glad to effing meet you too. So we kind of, but in a good way. So we've been family friends, my kids, everybody, we've just been such good friends. We speak probably 3 times a day. And the thing is with him, I learned about loyalty. The most important thing is be who you are, be yourself. Don't try to be something you're not. And again, I didn't work a lot of undercover. I maybe did 2 undercovers as a driver. I ran an undercover operation, but too many undercovers try to be somebody they're not. And that's everything in life. Be who you are.
Amen.
I was involved even with basketball. I had a job that was not the best job, and I didn't really need it. And he said to me, you need to leave because you're going to be referred to as working with this guy. And that's not what you want your reputation. You left on a great note with junior college and the NAIA program. So just little life lessons, just honest. Again, be who you are is the most important thing. And our friendship is, he's one of my closest, if not my closest friend.
Yeah. Let's segue into the basketball. How did coaching find you, and how did you find coaching? Because again, having a basketball background, loving, you played at the college level a little bit, but how did that really kind of manifest itself where you're like, you know what, this is something that I want to do, and I can use these life skills that I've learned through law enforcement and yet make it applicable to impact lives on the basketball court?
Well, I'll blame my daughter for that. When she wanted to start playing ball, so I registered her in the local league down here in Coral Springs. And I was just watching these parents. It was all about cheating. Like you have 1 through 8, you have 8 players. And I heard several parents that were coaching tell the kids, hey, just miss layups, shoot with your wrong hand, trip, so they could get all ones, you know what I mean? And they'll get them 1 through 8. And I'm like, that's crazy. So I said, you know what? I have to coach. I have to. I'm going to volunteer to coach. I told the kids, listen, I don't care if we win any games, but I'm going to teach you basketball. Now, I was out of the game for a long time. I think I played once at the time I was in my 30 something, 40 maybe. I played in the over 30 league, but even that wasn't worth it anymore. You know, my days were over. I played, you know, I enjoyed when I played. I played in college. I played a lot of ball when I got out of college. And I never had to live my life through my kids. And I never had to live my life. So I wanted to coach. So I started coaching in the rec league. Then we put together a little travel team. And the funniest thing is we put together a girls travel team and we played in this, it was like the YMCA league. No, I think it was the Jewish Center League. And we were all girls playing in the boys league. And
Wow.
we won the championship. They were so pissed off, they wouldn't even give us the trophies. They left them in a box. But my whole thing, and a couple of girls went on to play in high school. And then my daughter, as she progressed, I met a friend of mine through, actually was a retired cop. I had a friend, Jay McCormick, who ended up working for me years later, who passed away, the poor guy. And what happened was he introduced me, I believe the high school coach where he was at, the female coach was Trey Hellner. It was Wellington High School, and she had a travel team. And my daughter got on it, and it was the best thing for her. Now she's away from me. She's on her own. So she lands up making a high school team in ninth grade, starts every game on the varsity from ninth grade till the senior year. And I stopped, you know, and then she went on to play in college. You know, I also have a son that's 6'10". He didn't want to play ball. He played a little. I would have people come up to me and say, why don't you make him play? I don't have to live my life through my kids, but I will tell you, my son probably has the second largest sock company. It's on all over social media. It's called Rock'em. He does the NBA. He does Disney. He does baseball. You name it, WWE. He's making a hell of a lot more money with socks than he would on basketball. And
That's awesome.
the ironic thing, my youngest son was the baseball player. And well, take it back one step also. While he was at UCF, I got him hooked up with the coach at the time, who was Donnie Jones. And he was like a manager and a video guy. And that's where he actually started his company. But my youngest son, he got accepted to University of Florida. He had stopped playing baseball in 10th grade, hurt his knee. And I said, would you like to do what your brother did before he dropped out? And, you know, at Florida, he said, okay. I had to make phone calls just to get through to Billy Donovan through some other people. And Shaky Rodriguez, who was a great coach.
Shaky, yeah, FIU, yeah.
A friend of mine, he passed away 2 years ago. He was able to make a phone call, it was almost like a tryout for my son. Well, my son, by his senior year, was the head manager, and he's now in his 8th year with the Atlanta Hawks. He's a scout, and he's the senior manager of basketball operations. So I joke, I go, we're kind of dyslexic. My daughter played in high school and college. She hasn't picked up a ball. I got a 6'10" son. He doesn't want to play, but he has a big time company. And my little one, the baseball player, is in basketball. So my claim to fame now is that we finally got a Starkman in the NBA.
I love it, Coach. I love it. You know, and listening to your story, it triggers thoughts in my mind where in law enforcement and in a prison environment, inmates know fluff. And on the basketball court, if you're not staying true to yourself and staying true to your personality, if you're trying to be someone you're not, those players also know fluff. So I'm sure you just being who you were, teaching these life skills, you know, through the game of basketball had to make you a huge success and made you a draw for players to want to play for, you know, both male and female.
Well, how I started out, going back to how I started at Broward College, a very good friend of mine who I know since high school, he also worked, he transferred to Customs, Miles Son. He calls me up one Sunday morning. He goes, hey, Broward College is hiring a part-time women's coach. At the time, I was coaching my daughter in the travel team. I said, oh, that was 1997. I said, let me put in for it. I put in for it as a joke, and I got hired. So I was the assistant women's coach for 2 years, part-time while working full-time law enforcement. Then they let the coach go, and I became the women's head coach. And it's tough. It was tough. That's why I tell everybody I got my gray hair. And I said, the guys gave me the ulcers, you know. So then what happened was John Giordano, who was the athletic coordinator, basically did all the athletic director work. We became good friends. He calls me up. It was like a mob movie. He says, come on, meet me at this. We met at a game. And the men's team, I think they were like 2-15 that year. And I think I was 500, whatever, with the women's team. He goes, I got good news and bad news. Okay, what's the, give me the bad news. No, give me the good news. He says, the good news is you're not coaching the women's team. So now I'm figuring, oh, what's the bad news? I'm fired. He says, the bad news is you're taking over the men's team. I said, that's not so bad. First thing I did, got on the phone, contacted all, because remember, I'm part-time. Florida JuCo, some of the toughest in the country.
Woo,
Everybody
great athletes.
is full-time. Recruiting budget, 0. Visit 0, housing, maybe 5 guys when everybody's housing 12. I got on, I reached out for guys like Artie Cox, Rock Eisenberg, Mike Schiraldi, who I coached with. He had a big program, the Brooklyn Beast, and other guys. And they just started, we started getting players. My first year, I had Nate Daniels. He was first team All-American, player of the year. I mean, we literally had 8 to 9 NBA teams coming to watch him. I had Joe Marino from Queens. I had I had Adrian Jackson, who was a local kid. He was great. I mean, the best point guard I ever had. And we kept on getting it going. The next year, we actually lost in the first round of the playoffs. So I said, now I got to use something to motivate these guys. So we drove all the way up to Chipola College, which is about an 8-hour ride, 9 hours.
Mariana.
Right. I took them up there just to see what it's like, because I only knew from going up for the coaches meetings what it was like when I was the women's coach, not to participate in the tournament. I figured that would get them hungry. And the next year we went undefeated in conference. We walked right through the conference, and we finished 18th or 19th in the country. And I also had a kid that year named Adrian Yuta. I got a phone call from Rock Eisenberg, who's a longtime New York City coach. He said, listen, he was coaching at the wheelchair games at St. John's. He said, listen, I got you this kid, Adrian Yuta. He goes, 2 years he plays for you, he'll be in the Big East. It's good enough for me. I can't. Came down here. He was a little skinny, 6'5", 175 pounds, led the nation in rebounding, right? That summer, I didn't want him going back to New York because I know some people would have got a hold of him. They would have been paying him and getting him to play up in the Rucker. We got him into Kutcher Sports Academy, worked out, played, came back 6'7", 218. He should have been a third-team, second-team All-American. I believe politics kept him out of it. He made honorable mention, went on to play at Hofstra, had a good career. And to this day, it's 15 years, I believe, he's playing in Bahrain right now. He's played all over the world. And to me, those are the greatest things. I have other players like that too. That's what it's all about at the end of the day.
Amen. Amen.
And we'll keep in touch.
Yeah, and what I like about this is, you talked about Chipola. I was blessed that I was with Coach Bob Starkman, also a Florida Junior College Hall of Famer. And what an experience that was, because Florida has a lot of tremendous athletes. And when you're able to sprinkle in some hard-nosed, tough-nosed kids, East Coast, your New York City connections, sprinkle in some shooters from the Midwest, and, maybe some Division I transfers or whatnot. You've got a competitive league, and that panhandle there in Florida, I mean, that's some of the best basketball
Right.
In the nation. I mean, you think about Kansas at the junior college level,
Texas, maybe.
Missouri, Texas. That's right. And yet, you guys were in a conference and a division that was so tough, but yet then you get in, and you play for the state tournament. That's quality basketball. And a lot of people have no idea how good that league is.
Yeah, well, the thing also, it's funny, you look at rosters now, you see very few Florida kids here for the most part. I had no choice because I had to come up with a plan, like I equate that to a search warrant. Like you have to have a tactical plan. So I had to, I couldn't house as many kids. It was rough, but I knew how to work it. And, we only could get to a certain level because once you get past, I would try to get 2 or 3 studs, surround them with good hard-nosed players. And, everybody knew that when we played, those guys played hard. I always had my guys, I always laugh too, when I said, I think it was my 300th win, whatever it was. And I get interviewed. They're like, well, what about you? How do you feel? I go, listen, I didn't win those games. I love these guys. Oh, players win games. My job is to get them to play hard. And, how'd you get this All-American? Well, I coached him, but he became an All-American. You know what I mean? I don't take credit. I like to give credit where credit is due.
Amen.
And that's the hard thing. Was I able to bring in a lot of transfers? No. I also had a rule. Anytime you bring in more than 2 or 3 Division I transfers, you got a problem because they left for a reason. Now you need 3 basketballs because they want to show that they could score 20 a game or whatever for the most part. And again, I didn't have that luxury. My school, they were tough on the academics and it was really hard. No study hall. I'm there 2 hours a day, on the phone, and my assistant coach, and the money was terrible. And believe me, I didn't do it for the money. I did it for the right reason.
That's
And
right.
I think if people understand that when you do things in life for the right reason and you work hard, you become successful.
Amen. Amen to that. Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Coach Scott Field Show. Blessed and honored to have Coach Bob Starkman, author of Inside Both Courts, talking about some of his coaching experiences right now, but unbelievable career in law enforcement and basketball. And you mentioned something there a minute ago, when we were talking about law enforcement. You said you were blessed to have great people. Well, you were able to put people in a position to be successful because you identified their roles and their responsibilities and accentuated what they did well. Same thing, parallels onto the basketball court. When you got a kid who can shoot it and score it, well, yeah, you let him shoot and score. You got a great rebounder, you put him in a position to rebound. And it sounds like you did the same thing in both of your professions, and you did it quite well because how else would you be able to without all the hustling, because you didn't have the dorms, you didn't have the recruiting budget, but yet you allowed players to be successful and do what they did well, but prepared them to be mentally prepared, for tough athletic challenges. And I got to compliment you on that because we as coaches and males, our egos get in the way and we don't give flowers enough. So kudos to you for the job that you did with the limited resources that you had, Coach.
Thank you. I always tell the kids, listen, I could open a door for you, but you got to walk through the door. And then a couple of years ago, I came up with my little saying: the wrong people don't get you to the right places. And I mean that because, I joke, I go, see this? The worst weapon that's ever happened. This is the worst thing that's happened for sports. That a lot of these travel programs are just so crazy.
Oh.
I can't tell you, and as a coach, how many times I used to get videos. Now, the guy had 21 points on one shot. He showed me the 3-point shot he hit 7 different times, 7 different angles, but the scoreboard never changed.
Yeah.
I'm like, it's crazy. I always told him, let me see a whole tape. I want to see
right.
when you come out of the game. I need a tough kid that could suck it up. He makes a mistake, sit down, come back in, be a teammate. That's what I always, pride myself on.
I see, and I love that because, like you say, there's so many other facets to the game. You and I could put together a videotape of us playing, and we could look like all Americans.
Might
So
be tough
yeah.
to do a little editing at this age, but yeah.
but I truly know what you're saying. Talk about you're so humble. You were hardworking. You're a family man. You're dedicated to your family. But what did it mean to you to get that phone call to say, "Hey, Coach Starkman, you know what? You're being inducted into the Florida Junior College Hall of Fame." What did that mean to you and to your family?
Well, you're the first one to ask me. I'm going to let out a secret. I was coming home visiting my son, Bobby, although he likes to be called Rob. We still know him as Bobby. I was coming home, I believe it was 2015. He already had his business going. I spent a day up there, and I remember I was driving home, and I got a phone call. I had to pull over. I was kind of like shocked because not too many things. It was just like, wow. It was. Then it was pretty cool. And again, to me, people ask me, what's the greatest thing in your sports or law enforcement moment? Now, this may sound crazy to you. Yeah, I'm in the Hall of Fame. Yeah, I'm in the School Hall of Fame. I had a very good, career in law enforcement. My greatest accomplishment, believe it or not, was making my high school team.
Wow.
I think I got cut in 9th grade. I got cut in 10th grade. 11th grade, I got cut. Coach asked me to come. Like there was 2 games at the end of the season. They were playing against a new high school. I must have played so bad because I have a great memory. Most of my book was written from memory.
Wow.
A lot of pictures to refresh it. And I must have played terrible because I don't even remember. It was like blank. But then I remember how hard I worked to make my high school team. And I made
Wow.
it and I started. And to me, that was like the greatest thing. And that meant because it's something I wanted so bad. And I finally got it. And that's why, I look back, and we all grow up different ways. We all have family problems. We all have issues that happen. And, my life wasn't the best. My mother passed away. I was 15 years old. It was tough, but I think that's what made me tougher. Like, everybody's different. My sister reacted different. My brother reacted different. I handle things different. That's who I am, and I'm very happy. And I give a lot of credit to my wife because I'd probably still be looking for a job now if I didn't start dating her. She didn't help me for a while. So I got to give her a lot of credit. I don't give her that much credit, but yes, and my family's great. I mean, my wife, my daughter Allison, her husband Chuck. I got 2 grandkids, Madeline and James. My son Danny, his wife Faith, and little Joseph, and my son Rob's girlfriend Steph, and them. We're blessed. We have a really good family, and thank God they're all doing well. Nobody's living home. I don't have to send them no money. And I'm very, attribute a lot to my wife. I mean, I was working 2 jobs. And she did a good job. She should have been a warden, I told her.
I love that. But Coach, when I hear you share that story, I hear the pride of your family, but I also hear perseverance. And that's become a lost skill because nowadays these kids, as you know, through this grassroots basketball, they just bounce from travel team to travel team. If they're not playing over here, they're going to go play over there. And they don't learn perseverance and grinding it out and stick toing it and trying to obtain your goal. Everybody just looks for the easiest route, and I feel like that's crippling society. But to hear you say that story of being cut your freshman year, your sophomore year, and then finally making it, and the pride that you had in that accomplishment, there's a lot to be said for that because that's a lost skill in today's society, I believe.
Well, again, that's what I like to implement to the kids. You want to teach them that. And since I'm not coaching college, I have a very good friend, Admiral White of mine. He's a school teacher. He's also the coach at Boyd Anderson. And he was a great player. I mean, I watched him in our gym here when I used to go to LA Fitness, and he would just toy with these kids. That's how good he is. He asked me to help him out at the high school. And I'm helping him. And it's fun, but it's so different. Like, you're dealing with some 15-year-old fourth. It's so different. But I listen to him because I'm learning. I know how to deal with kids, and it's just it's something I'm volunteering. I'd like to be able to give back. You know what I mean? Like if I could help them.
Amen.
But at the same time, Admore was the same guy. Anytime I looked at a kid at Broward or Dade County, besides Shaky Rodriguez, Admore was the only other guy that would always be honest. Don't take this kid. Take this kid. Be careful. And I have the utmost respect for people like that. So for him to ask me, I took that as a compliment. Like he wants, and it's nice. It's very nice. So it's fun. That's
You
where I came
betcha.
from before I got here,
I
before the show,
love
I was working
it.
out with the kids.
So again, Coach Bob Starkman, Inside Both Courts. Go get that on Amazon. But let me ask you this, Coach. We got about 5 minutes. Was there, looking back at it, because it's a wonderful book, but because you putting it together with your story, was there any part now that you wish would have been in the book that maybe was left out? And you're like, oh man, I wish I would have put that in there.
Yes, I gotta, and I hope they're gonna listen to this. There were 2 coaches that I always dealt with. Jared Grosso was an assistant for Tim Cluse at Iona. He was always great to me. And I don't know if you know Barry Ross and Slice. Slice was at Kentucky, Manhattan, St. John. He's just aces, and he did something like, he's just such good guys. And I forgot to put him in the book. And another coach, Dave Smart from Carleton University in Canada. I met him. He used to come down for like 15 years. Those
Wow.
3 guys are 3 of the best coaches that I failed to mention because I don't mention a lot. I mentioned, I always say life's a 2-way street. And once I stopped coaching or I didn't have a job, people didn't know who I was, but that's okay. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I got my pension from the federal government, and I got a little coaching pension.
There you
And, I like the fact these guys still keep in touch with me, as well as a few others. Tim Kaine, who's at LSU. Very few guys are real. Those two guys, I apologize to them. I wish there was a way I could just like put a sheet of paper and mention in, those guys. But,
little excerpt. Hey, we'll send them a copy of this show,
yeah,
so that
yeah.
way they get their kudos, and I appreciate you sharing that. Just in a couple 2 or 3 minutes here, Coach. What were some of the best life lessons? Or you were telling a story a minute ago, and you say we'll go to this at the end. But is there anything? What's something else you want the viewers to know about Coach Bob Starkman and your family?
No, I hope I did the right thing. I got a strong wife that put up with me, which is probably she deserves like a Medal of Honor. And, I just think family's important. I don't know, I'd like to believe that my kids are successful, that, seeing me working two jobs, I'm sometimes I'm not the easiest guy, or I was, and I've calmed down. And I think that comes first, and put your family first. And if you have a good family, you got everything. You got health, you got more than everything. And I think that's the most important thing. And good friends. One of my closest friends is Paul Martinez. He owns a big police supply store. I mentioned him in there. Told me something a couple of years ago. He says, you know what? Keep your circle of friends tight.
Ooh.
Amen to that. And he is like, he's like my brother. My brother passed away recently. My sister did. And this guy's like my brother. We speak every day when he gets out of work 10 after 6. And he used to be at Broward. If like 6:15, my phone rang because I never answered the phone. All right, shoot free throws. So I'm all right. You're on the phone with Paulie. So, I think that's the one thing that, and as I got older, more mature, because, you're a little wild, you're running around, chasing bad guys, you're working in a jail. My kids were all born in Florida, so they're raised a little different. They don't have the New York in them. And, I think that's the greatest thing, is just having a great family. I don't think it's better than that.
I love that, ladies and gentlemen. Yes, I love these nuggets that Coach Starkman is sharing with us. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the Coach Scott Field Show. Get a hold of my man Todd at Sleep Number 801-845-9058. If you've never gone into a showroom with Sleep Number, you got to get in there, because I'm going to tell you what, you will get a restful night's sleep. And again, don't forget my friends at rockwelltime.com. Some amazing watch pieces and merchandise. Just thrilled to have their relationship and partnership here with us on the show. Coach, in like a minute, what last nugget? Because to me, this is all about relationships, and I'm glad we got to connect and grow our friendship, through this platform. But, relationships, and I heard you talk earlier about the gentleman, you would speak to 3 times, a day. And then you just mentioned, the guy that you're going to speak to, every night after 6 o'clock. Those relationships through sports and through law enforcement, how did that help you become who you are today?
Well, again, you learn a lot. And I believe that every day, I'm 67 years old. Every day I try to learn something. And, you like to, you always take a negative, make it into a positive. And I think one of the biggest attributes is that I'd like to believe that I've influenced, of course, most importantly, my family, but also that they saw the way I was to others, and it's not about race, color, creed, whatever religion. It's the world is a mess now. And I think people have to, you have to really be smart, open-minded, and shrewd. And to me, I'm looking at your background, I'm saying it's an honor. You got Mark Eaton. I see, what's that? I see Charles Oakley, Jay Wright, who I met before, a very nice man. To be on a show that these guys run makes me feel good.
Coach, you deserve it, man. What a life you've lived. You've impacted many lives, and thrilled and honored to have you share your acts of service with our viewers. And to me, that's what it's all about: empowering, inspiring, and motivating others to pass that torch. And Coach, you exemplify that. I'm honored to have you on as a guest. And brother, let's continue to connect, because it'd be fun to share even more stories with you, brother.
Thank you so much. And I say it was an honor to be on your show, and it was It was really, you're really prepared, and I like that. That was good, and we could probably go on for 4 hours, but I got to make some book sales. No, I'm just
That's right. Look at here again. Inside Both Courts, Coach Bob Starkman. Get that at Amazon.com. You've been watching the Coach Scott Field Show. Stay tuned for just outstanding content and outstanding guests, just like Coach Starkman. Be blessed, be safe, and go out and continue to impact others. God bless you.
man. Take care.